Hi there, Good Shepherd folks. I just wanted to take some time to share with you a brief address, just looking back on the past year and looking ahead to this next year, and just a few of my own personal reflections on being your pastor this past year, and just kind of what's going around and rattling around in my head for looking ahead and setting vision for the coming year. So. Uh, to begin, just state the obvious. This has been an interesting year for lots of reasons and for lots of people. Uh, in our congregation, there's a few things I just want to highlight, but we've weathered several life bumps this year. Uh, First of all, we've had a handful of deaths this year that have been of people in our part of our community or affected people in our community. Just to remind you, Roger Metzger, Dwayne Gettler, Diane Ernst, all losses of our church community this year that have marked us, and we're still grieving over those. Uh, and there have been a couple deaths that have affected people that are in our church community. Ron Calhoun's dad, the Calhoun family's grandfather, Paul Calhoun, Casey Muller's stepdad, grandfather to the Muller kids, Roger Erb. These are deaths that have impacted and affected the lives of those in our community. And if anything, these deaths remind us of the fragility of life, but also, in some ways, I think bring us together closer as a community. As Scripture says, we weep with those who weep. And so hard times, but hopefully uh, we have a network of families that provide encouragement and comfort in these times. This year, we've had several illnesses and accidents, as happens with life. Several surgeries for people in our community, falls, COVID illnesses, other various health problems that have emerged. These are all things that we've weathered this year. We've also had joys that are worth celebrating. I think of Bo Bartz's clean bill of health this year. That's a great joy. Man, that's a great thing to celebrate. I I think of a couple weddings that we've had this summer. I did a couple baptisms. We had 21 or so new members right before the pandemic hit in the early year this year. And we have more to come in this coming year. That's something to be excited about, to rejoice about. Um, we had some fun with outdoor worship this summer, trying to navigate and get together outside during the warm weather while we couldn't get together inside. And we'll likely return to that this summer in some way, so that's exciting and fun to think about. So we've had joys, we've had things to celebrate, birthdays, anniversaries. Uh, and so, Scripture says we weep with those who weep, but we also rejoice with those who rejoice. And in short, we navigate the ups and downs of life together as a community of people of Jesus. In our world this year, and in our nation, and in our culture, we've had some cultural bumps that we've weathered. Just to remind you, we're in the midst of a pandemic, and that emerged in early this year, in February and March. And that's caused some uncertainty and anxiety and stress for all of us. It's created tension and struggle with our livelihoods, in our society, in our jobs, in our businesses, for the elderly population to be kind of stuck at home and not be able to celebrate certain milestones or yearly celebrations, holidays, and things like that. So we've weathered that this year. We've weathered kind of political unrest in our nation, which isn't abnormal. That's normal. It happens. It comes and goes. But whenever it happens, it's destabilizing and stressful, frustrating, whatever it might be. But we've weathered that this year. We've had social unrest this year. Again, nothing new, but it happens from time to time. I think back to the 1980s and the 90s, there was social unrest. Some of you were alive during the 60s and 70s. It comes and goes, but when it happens, it again causes stress, anxiety, frustration, whatever it might be. We've weathered that this year. And just kind of in general, because of all of these things sort of coalescing this year in our culture, in our world, we've gone through various levels of stress and anxiety and isolation and larger scale uncertainty about the present and the future in our world and in our culture. And we've weathered an over noisy social media that has, I think, more often contributed to confusion and chaos than clarity and peace. So this year we've weathered a lot of things in our culture, in our world, and as a church community. And as a church, as your pastor, figuring out how to navigate and be the church and to lead a church amid all of this is certainly no easy challenge. There's no model or playbook for being a pastor and leading a church through these things. And so there's been more trial and error than anything else, more uncertainty, more fly by the seat of your pants sort of thing, which thank God that I happen to be an individual who's good at that. Or maybe not good at it, but that's how I operate. But nevertheless, it's been difficult. And across the nation, across the world, pastoral burnout is at a near all-time high. And it doesn't seem to be going away in the near future. There's an article this past year on the internet about kind of the impending doom for many churches of pastors just walking out because of burnout. So it's been a challenging year, and not to scare anyone, I'm not going anywhere, but it has been a challenging year for many people for many reasons, and for churches and for pastors. It's been a year of change, and with change and destabilization, struggle in life, which comes and goes, we all have it, and we can ignore it, we can let it overwhelm us and overtake us, or we can move with it and learn to adapt and be nimble and trust in hope and trust in God as we move ahead. And not very consistently, but I choose the last option as an individual, for our family, and for our church. How can we move with the change? How can we adapt and be nimble and grow? So for me as your pastor, this has been a year that's caused a lot of rethinking and reflection about what in the world the church is for in this world. What is the purpose of the church anymore? I do believe that there is a great purpose for God's people, for the church, for people who witness to the goodness and hope of the gospel. There's a great purpose for that. But sorting out what that purpose is and how we play it out, that's another question that I've been thinking a lot about this year. On top of all those things, for us, for me, for my family, we're new in town this year. And so we've been navigating, adjusting and adapting to a new town, a new community, particularly a small rural community, which, as I think about, sometimes seem, Adair is smaller than the college I went to, and so I think of kind of college life. In some ways, this small community that we have here is like a college campus, but everyone lives in their own homes rather than in the dorms, and we don't all eat together in the dining hall. But there's a closeness, a camaraderie, a sense of community that reminds me of living on a college campus. And that's exciting to think about. And to think about what can you do with that? What are the potentials? But living in this, moving to Adair also has caused us to take on and to learn and get used to different rhythms of life that are not those of living in Des Moines. And so we're adjusting to that, a new school community for our kids. learning to deal with, in a small town where things are closer and people talk and stuff like that, learning to deal with assumptions about about the pastor and the pastor's family. And oftentimes the assumptions and the stereotypes are really not helpful. Sometimes they're amusing, sometimes they're frustrating, but we're learning to deal with that and to navigate those and to respond to those and to reject them mostly, and to just live as everyday people, normal family, but who happens to be a family that wants everyone else to know that God has not abandoned us. God has not abandoned you. God is for you. There is hope. You can actually live a good life and enjoy life and have God at the center of it. So we're learning to navigate those things. We're learning new neighbors, new names, new families, and the many family connections that are here in Adair. So that's new to us. That's been happening this year. But in the midst of all of this, for me as an individual, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, as your pastor, this past year has revealed to me, and I think to all of us, that we live in a very fragile, dysfunctional, and uncertain world. We live in a world where people are literally turning every different direction, rubbernecking, if you will, in search for hope, for purpose, for meaning. And that's exciting. So many people are striving to find hope and meaning in their lives. And the fact that we live in a dysfunctional, fragile world isn't anything new. But realizing that in a deeper way, maybe that's good for us, and maybe there's potential in that. But anyway, in all of that, that reveals to me that there's a lot of work to do in this life that we live, to make sense of it and to bring meaning. And I believe that the gospel of Jesus, the good news of God, does do that for us. And it makes me all the more excited and want to think in creative ways about how to communicate that. And it makes me think about as the church. What are we as the church? Not the American institution that many of us think of, but the people of God who are tethered to the reality of Jesus Christ. People who are followers of Jesus as God among us. Our task in this world, in this life on this planet, is to offer hope, to offer stability and meaning that rises above the uncertainty of this world. And the more I think about it, the more I want our church community to be a learning community that's always learning, always asking questions, always wanting to grow in our allegiance to Jesus, in our way of being a light to the world. Our task on this planet is to offer that hope and to be a learning community that seeks always to grow. And being part of a church doesn't make us better people, it makes for better living. And if anything, I want to solidify that this coming year. Remind us of that, but put us on the move to be sharers of that good news with the community around us. And as I think about all of that, there are a few things I want to highlight. For what I think are central virtues of being people of the gospel. And so here is what I want to highlight, these central virtues: humility, hospitality, honesty, and hope. I want to focus on these this year. Humility, hospitality, there you go, honesty, and hope. I'd like us to focus on these this year. Humility. Humility is central to the way of Jesus. In Matthew 11, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are burdened and weary, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Jesus is all about cultivating humility. He was humble, and following him, if anything, is a way of humility, of not thinking greater of yourselves than you should, and of humbly serving the world around you. Hospitality, God revealed in Jesus, is an endlessly generous and welcoming God. That's what Jesus shows us. And I think of the prodigal son story. The father in the prodigal son story welcomes his prodigal son home, no questions asked. Welcomes him into a good home where he can find rest and restore his life. That's what God is about for us. I think of in Romans 15:7, Paul says to the community in Rome, he says, welcome each other in the same way that Christ welcomed you. We are to be a people of hospitality that welcomes. This is not just opening your home and serving good food. It's more than that. It's an outlook of life that is an outlook of generosity of spirit, that is forgiving, understanding, serving, peaceful. Hospitality is an act of love, the way that God defines love. It looks out for the best of one's neighbor, the best of one's family, family members in your family. It looks out for the best even of your enemy. It changes the lives of those who both give and receive the hospitality of God that looks out for the best of everyone and that welcomes. And we want to be people of honesty. Jesus and the Christian life of following Jesus is nothing if it's not honest about ourselves and the world we live in. Hospitality, the life of hospitality of God's generosity, doesn't ignore imperfections, injustices, or hurts, but it overcomes them and transforms life because it's honest. The way of honesty faces life as it is. It's a life that doesn't shy away from reality. We don't sugarcoat things. We don't insist on being happy and pushing through. We don't ignore evil, injustice, or pain. We see things for what they are, and we name them for what they are. And then we actively and humbly offer to the world something better. So we want to be a people of honesty that sees ourselves for who we are and sees the world for what it is, and then responds to reality. And we want to be people of hope. We want to be people who live with radical hope in something greater than ourselves. The hope in God is what motivates us, is what drives us. Hope leads us on. In Romans 5, Paul writes this. He says, we take pride in difficulty because we know that difficulty produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And this hope doesn't disappoint us because the love of God has been given to us through the Holy Spirit. Above all, we're people of hope because we trust in something beyond ourselves. Hope in God particularly means that we are not the be-all and the end-all of our own existence. There's something greater than us that carries us, that leads us on. Hope in God means that the quality and the direction of our lives is not determined by our own inner strength or our own capabilities or our own will to get through. We as humans are honest about the fact that we will struggle and crash. And we're honest about the fact that we need something greater than ourselves to see us through. Hope in God's future is always greater. And it's the thing that illuminates our way, that powers us through, that gives us light to see through darkness. So if anything, I want to focus on these things: humility, hospitality, honesty, and hope as central virtues of who we are at Good Shepherd, as people of the gospel. That's our vision for this year, for going ahead. And as we do this, I want to focus on how we can do it together. How can we carry these virtues forward in our lives, in our community, through our church together? And above all, as we do it, I want to be a pastor who listens, and who listens to understand, so that we can move forward together well in our uncertain world with humility, with hospitality, with honesty, and with hope. It's no secret in our culture, in our world, that church, being part of a church, is not the top of the list for the majority of people. That's the honest truth. Then there's no secret about it. And it's better that we acknowledge it. And then ask, well, what can we do about that? How can we bring these virtues of the gospel to the lives of the world around us? Church is important. I believe that. Not as an institution, but as a community of people who bring hope. And so I want to ask questions. I want to understand what tips the scales. What makes church, being part of a church, important? What makes it not worth your time? I want to understand that and respond creatively to meet those needs, to ask the questions, but then also to respond to the answers so that we can bring hope to the world. This world's a fast-changing place. The gospel, I think, is the hope of the world. I'm convinced of that. I wouldn't be here if I weren't. But as the church, as the people who follow Jesus, who bring hope to the world, okay, not as the institution, but as a community of hope, I want to be ahead of the change in this world as good shepherd. I don't want to be playing catch up with everything. I want to be ahead of the change with God's hope, with humility, with honesty and hospitality. I want to seek to understand how we can be bringers of goodness and light to our lives, the lives of our families, the lives of the people around us. To bring light to Adair in a good way that touches all kinds of aspects. Let's think beyond just the religious box. I want to think about together with you, how can we creatively embody the goodness of Jesus in a way that breaks through old characterizations of who Jesus is, that breaks through characterizations and stereotypes about faith and about church. I want to break through all of that stuff and bring something new and fresh with you together, working together to do that. And I want to seek to cultivate above all involvement. Not involvement in church as maybe we used to think about, but involvement as God's people in the effort of bringing goodness and the light of the gospel to the world around us in creative ways. So that's what I look forward to this year as your pastor, to listen and to understand and to work together as a community, to be humble, to bring hospitality, the hospitality of God, to be honest about our lives, and to bring the hope of Jesus to the world. And I hope to bring you on board with that. And I hope that the future is bright. I trust that it is. But we're in this together as God's people. And so let's chart ahead with the light of Jesus, with the joy of being people of God, and let's think of new ways and creative ways to bring God to the center of our lives, so that living life might be better. I look forward to continuing the conversation, and just my family and I are thankful and proud and happy to be here in Adair, to be your pastor, and to be getting to know all of you. And we look forward to this year and to future years. So that's all I got as our annual meeting replacement address to you, and God's blessings to you guys today and tomorrow and every day. We'll see you soon, hopefully in church.